They never wanted you to know this, not because it's dangerous in the way they teach you to fear, but because it's powerful in the way they never taught you to believe. There is a reason the richest men and women in history woke up before the sun, not just to hustle, but to align. The kind of wealth they accessed wasn't merely financial. It was energetic, generational, magnetic, but you were told it's all about working harder, grinding longer, and sacrificing peace for paper. You were programmed to chase, never to attract. You see, there's a ritual so old, so simple, that it's been buried beneath centuries of noise, a ritual designed to rewire your frequency and pull opportunities toward you like iron to a magnet. It was practiced in silence at dawn, in secret rooms and desert caves, passed through whispers among those who understood the mechanics of manifestation, not as a fantasy, but as a forgotten science. And now, you're about to remember it. As soon as we reach 50 subscribers, we'll be giving away $1,000 to one lucky follower. Subscribe now and turn on the bell so you don't miss it. They'll tell you this is superstition. They'll laugh, but they laughed at every prophet before the flood, because the truth doesn't shout, it waits in stillness. And every morning you wake up without intention, the system wins. Every day you reach for your phone before your breath, you're feeding the loop of lack, of confusion, of distraction. But what if you stopped, just for a moment? What if tomorrow morning, before the world wakes up, you sat with yourself, in silence, and listened to the thoughts you've been avoiding, the ones that beg you to do something different? Because wealth does not come to those who wait. It comes to those who tune in. And you were never out of tune. You were just trained to forget the melody. Before we go further, comment where you're watching this from, and make sure to like and subscribe if something inside you already knows this truth. You've heard the phrase, the early bird gets the worm, but they never told you why. It's not because the world rewards those who wake up early. It's because the field is open. There's less noise, fewer competing frequencies. The collective mind is still half asleep, and in that fragile gap, the veil between your conscious reality and your deeper programming is at its thinnest. This is the space where reality bends, where thoughts aren't just thoughts, they're commands. You weren't born poor or lazy or unlucky. You were born whole, clear, aligned, but by the time you were 5 years old, the script had already been downloaded. Money is hard to get. People like us don't get rich. Rich people are greedy. Each phrase was a brick, and soon you were walled inside someone else's definition of limitation. But here's what they never told you. That wall was made of sound, of words, of repeated beliefs. And anything made of sound can be rewritten with frequency. That's why the ancient ones spoke blessings at sunrise, why monks chant before speaking, why the first words of your day are more powerful than the last words of your night. When you rise before the world, you step outside the programming field, if only for a moment. And in that moment you can reprogram everything. But you have to choose, because every morning you're presented with two doors, the familiar script or the forgotten code. One leads to more of the same, the other to everything they told you was impossible. And it begins not with action but with stillness, not with striving but with remembrance. Do you feel it? That pressure in your chest, like a truth trying to surface. That's not anxiety. That's your deeper self waking up, asking to be seen. It's been waiting for you in the silence you keep running from, and when you finally sit with it, when you ask not what should I do, but who am I without the programming, something ancient begins to stir, not in the sky, not in the bank account, but inside, where real wealth begins. They didn't just teach you what to think, they taught you what not to remember. From the moment you were old enough to absorb language, you were being coded. Every cartoon, every school bell, every commercial, every adult sighing about bills, all of it was part of the machine. And the most dangerous part, it wasn't obvious. It felt normal, innocent, harmless. But beneath that routine was a system carefully designed to shut down your inner magnet. Because a person who remembers their ability to attract, not beg, not chase, but attract, is ungovernable. That's why wealth, real wealth, was turned into a god you must sacrifice yourself to please. Why the idea of earning replaced the truth of alignment. They had to convince you that everything must be hard, that your desires are selfish, that your imagination is childish. So you'd stop listening to the only voice that could lead you home. You were never lazy. You were numbed, trained to seek safety and sameness, to repeat the cycle, clock in, clock out collapse. They fed you motivational slogans while draining your soul through routine. And here's the cruelest twist. They made you believe you were the problem, that if you weren't rich, it was your fault, that if you didn't manifest, you lacked discipline. But they never told you the system was designed to disconnect you from your source, to keep your body busy and your mind asleep. And they certainly never told you that you could step outside of it simply by waking up an hour earlier and tuning in, because in that quiet hour, before the scroll, before the traffic, before the obligations, you remember, not through effort, through reception. You don't build the signal, you receive it. And in that receiving, you begin to align, not with a fantasy version of success, but with your natural state, ease, clarity, power, the ability to walk into a room and shift the energy just by being present. That is what the system cannot program, that is what it fears. So it taught you to fear stillness, to fill every silence with noise. But wealth is born in silence, in that space where you stop performing and begin remembering. There is a reason ancient temples were built facing the rising sun, a reason sacred texts speak of morning dew as if it holds secrets, and a reason mystics throughout history withdrew from the city before dawn, not to escape life, but to rewrite it. You think rituals are candles and incense, but the most powerful ritual is simply attention, directed intentionally in silence. That's why you've never been taught how to be still, only how to be productive, because the moment you sit with yourself, the veil begins to lift. And when it does, you start seeing the trap for what it is, not just in the world, but within. The automatic thoughts, the inherited beliefs, the invisible script that's been running you like clockwork since childhood. But every script can be rewritten, and morning is the only time your inner system is soft enough to allow it. The forgotten ones knew this, the desert seers, the women who whispered prayers before sunrise while the village still slept, the nameless monk who kept no possessions, yet had more abundance than any king. They weren't lucky. They understood frequency, that before the sun touches your skin, before the noise of the day begins, your field is open, your mind is receptive, your emotions aren't yet hijacked by outside demands. This is the moment where you either feed the old pattern or plant a new one. And the wealthiest souls, the ones who manifest with uncanny ease, aren't operating on hustle. They're operating on alignment, on attunement, on inner clarity so sharp that even the universe responds with obedience. But this is the part they hope you'll ignore, because if you knew that just 10 minutes of intentional stillness in the morning could alter the trajectory of your finances, your emotions, your destiny, you'd never go back to sleep. You'd stop consuming and start transmitting. You'd stop begging and start magnetizing. But to do that, you must face the hardest thing of all, your own inner noise, the voices that tell you it's a waste of time, that you're not doing it right, that nothing's changing. Those voices aren't yours. They're echoes of the program, designed to pull you back into the loop. But if you can sit through the discomfort, if you can stay in the silence long enough, something strange happens. The noise begins to fade, and beneath it you hear something else, a whisper, not in words, but in feeling, a frequency, a knowing, a command. And that is where the ritual begins. Something happens when you return to this ritual for more than just one day. At first it's subtle, like a shift in the wind, barely noticeable unless you're still enough to feel it. You begin to notice that life responds differently. Strangers smile longer. You think of someone, and they call. The right opportunity lands in your inbox without warning, and you want to call it coincidence, but deep down you know, this is what alignment feels like. This is what happens when your inner frequency starts vibrating with clarity instead of confusion. Not because you chanted the right mantra or visualized the perfect mansion, but because you remembered who you were before the noise. That version of you, the one who doesn't doubt, doesn't chase, doesn't ask permission to exist. That's your wealth blueprint. And every morning you commit to this sacred stillness, you're restoring it. But let's be honest, the system hates this. It will throw everything at you. Oversleeping, sudden urgency, that addictive scroll that feels innocent but drains your soul before your feet even hit the floor. And when that doesn't work, it whispers, "This isn't working. This is stupid. You're wasting time." But those thoughts aren't truth. They're resistance scripts. Think of them like spiritual firewalls, designed to keep you locked in the old loop. Because if you pass through them, if you dare to keep going, the system knows it loses you. Not your body, perhaps, but your mind. And when your mind is free, everything else follows. This is why the wealthy often seem lucky. They're not obeying the same programming. They've either broken the script consciously or inherited a version that permits expansion. But you were given the script of survival, of hustle, of spiritual amnesia. So your wealth won't come from copying what they do. It comes from remembering what you are. And this remembering happens not in theory, but in repetition. A sacred loop, not of slavery, but of sovereignty. You wake up, you tune in, you speak your truth into the field, you listen, and then you act, not frantically, not desperately, but with calm precision, like someone who knows the game and refuses to be played by it. That's when the field responds, not to your fear, but to your clarity, not to your begging, but to your frequency. You'll notice it first in the smallest ways. A check arrives early, a client finds you instead of the other way around, you sleep better, you breathe deeper, and slowly the mirror shifts. Because reality is just that, a mirror. It cannot reflect what you haven't dared to project. And now, you're projecting something different. Every time you look at your bank account and feel a sting, that's not the numbers hurting you. It's the story behind them. The silent script you carry, often unspoken, that says, "This is what I deserve, this is all I can hold." You think you're reacting to the world, but the world is reacting to you. And not to your words or your wants, but to your hidden agreements, the ones you signed with your energy long ago, often without knowing. Agreements like, wealth is for them, not me. If I have too much, I'll lose love. Success means loneliness. These are not logical thoughts. They are encoded beliefs, buried in the shadows of your subconscious, looping quietly each day you forget to look inward. And until you face those agreements, the mirror will keep reflecting the same limits, no matter how hard you grind. But here's the secret they never wanted you to hear. Those agreements can be rewritten, not by thinking differently once, but by choosing differently repeatedly, when no one is watching. That's what the morning ritual is for, not for manifesting cars or homes, those aside. Effects. It's for breaking contracts you didn't even know you made, the ones that keep you small, the ones inherited from your parents, your culture, your religion. A client once told me, "I realized I was chasing money just to prove my father wrong." Another said, "Every time I got close to financial freedom, I'd sabotage it, because deep down I believed wealth meant losing my identity." These aren't rare stories. These are the standard settings for most people. But because they're hidden, behind logic, ambition, and responsibility, we call them normal. And that's the trap, a life of quiet resistance wrapped in productivity. You're doing everything right, and nothing is working. Why? Because you're still obeying the original script, the one downloaded into your nervous system long before you could question it. But when you wake up before the world, when you sit with yourself instead of your screens, you step out of the performance. You begin to notice where your thoughts are, not yours, where your actions serve an old identity, where your fears were inherited, not chosen. And in that noticing, you create space. Space is the true currency of creation. Without space, there is no power, only repetition. And when you finally create that space, not just once, but as a new standard, the mirror must shift. Reality cannot help it. The field responds to clarity. It echoes back your vibration. And when you vibrate with sovereignty, with remembrance, with truth, the world begins to rearrange itself to match. You were never meant to chase. You were designed to draw things in. Your biology knows it. Your spirit aches for it. But your programming, oh, the programming, it has convinced you that unless you're running, grinding, outperforming, you are unworthy. And so you wake each day in a panic, a low-frequency hum of fear vibrating beneath everything. Am I doing enough? Will I be okay? How do I survive this month? But the truth is, the most magnetic people, the ones who seem to glide through life pulling love, money, and opportunity toward them, aren't operating on panic. They're vibrating on presence. And presence is only accessible when you disarm the noise. That's what this ritual does. Every morning you return to silence, you lower the static. You stop broadcasting fear and start emanating coherence. And coherence is irresistible to the field. Let me say that again. Not because you didn't hear it, but because part of you forgot how to believe it. Coherence is irresistible. When your inner world aligns, your thoughts, emotions, breath, and intention, the field around you changes. People feel it. Circumstances shift. You no longer have to explain yourself or prove your worth. The energy you carry speaks first, and it says, I am safe, I am certain, I am already receiving. That's when money starts showing up in unexpected ways. Not because the universe suddenly noticed you, but because you finally tuned in. You stopped jamming your signal with doubt and distraction. You remembered the original frequency, the one you were born with before the system injected fear into your cells. You've felt this before, haven't you? Those rare moments when everything just flows. You meet the right person at the right time. An idea drops into your mind like lightning. A door opens where none existed. And afterward, you tell yourself it was luck. But it wasn't. It was alignment. The system trains you to forget those moments, to dismiss them as accidents. Because if you knew how to create them on command, the game would be over. You wouldn't need their approval, their systems, their rewards. You'd realize that wealth, true wealth, is not a number, but a signal. And that signal is broadcast from your state of being. Every morning, every breath, every moment you choose presence over panic. So ask yourself, what frequency have you been living on? What energy do you bring into your room, your work, your relationships? Is it the energy of trust or tension, of magnetism or noise? And more importantly, what would happen if starting tomorrow you chose differently? There's a contract you've been honoring your whole life, and you never even signed it. It was handed to you the moment you were born into a world that worships struggle. A silent agreement that said, you will work hard, prove your value, suppress your intuition, and accept crumbs as a reward. And because everyone around you was following the same script, you didn't question it. How could you? The scarcity contract was woven into lullabies, into textbooks, into prayers spoken over dinner. It became the atmosphere of your childhood. Money doesn't grow on trees. Life isn't fair. Be grateful for what you have. These aren't just phrases. They're anchors. Anchors that keep your inner frequency locked in limitation. And as long as that frequency remains, wealth cannot stay. It might visit temporarily, but it will find no home in a field coded with unworthiness. You've probably seen it. People who rise financially only to sabotage it. Lottery winners who lose everything. Entrepreneurs who burn out. Healers who can't pay their bills. That's not misfortune. That's the frequency rejecting what the mind isn't prepared to hold. Because until you rewrite the contract, you'll keep leaking energy in the same direction, away from your truth, toward their script. That's why the ritual isn't optional. It's not just self-care, it's self-liberation. Every morning you sit in silence, you're not just calming yourself, you're stepping outside the contract. You're declaring, I no longer agree to the lie of lack. And this declaration isn't spoken with words, it's felt with certainty. A calm, steady knowing that says, I am safe to expand. Not because you hustled hard enough or became perfect, but because you remembered, you realigned. And when you do this consistently, the old contract begins to tear. The thoughts lose their grip. The scarcity loop weakens. You stop seeing life through the lens of not enough and begin to notice how much was always available. When you stopped clutching, you begin to receive, not because you begged, but because your energy became a match for receiving. That's the key they hid from you. Receiving is a skill, a state, and most people never learn it because the contract says, only take what you've earned. But you were born worthy, not by effort, by essence. And the deeper you go into this remembrance, the less sense the old world makes. Scarcity becomes laughable, competition becomes irrelevant, comparison fades, because you begin to see that wealth was never about accumulation, it was about permission, and the only one who could ever give it to you was you. Eventually, something begins to speak to you from within the stillness, not a voice in the way you were taught to expect, not language, not sound, but recognition, a feeling that rises like warmth from the spine, a quiet clarity that cuts through every doubt you've ever carried. And once you've heard it, even once, you cannot go back. You try. You return to your old habits, your old pace, your old justifications. But something has changed. The mask no longer fits. The loop feels tighter, suffocating, because now you've tasted truth, and truth makes illusions intolerable. That's the real reason people quit their rituals, not because they failed, but because they worked. They awakened something ancient, and awakening requires transformation. Comfort can't survive there, and neither can the false self. That voice, that presence, doesn't rush you. It waits. Every morning you return to the silence. It meets you, not to scold or demand, but to reveal. It shows you where you've been living as a version of yourself designed for survival, not expansion, where you've betrayed your inner knowing for external approval, where your identity was crafted not by your soul, but by your fears. And here's the most confronting part. It asks you to let go of who you've become in order to return to who you are. That is the death most people avoid, not of the body, but of the false self, the performer, the achiever, the pleaser, and yes, even the victim. Because wealth, true wealth, demands you shed the story that you are powerless, and it's terrifying. There's grief in it, rage too. You begin to realize just how many years you lived in a trance, how much of your potential was negotiated. A way for temporary safety. You cry, you resist, you bargain, and then you surrender, not to defeat but to truth. And in that surrender, something opens, like a locked door in the center of your chest, slowly creaking open. And behind it, peace. Not the peace of nothingness, but the peace of remembrance, of knowing that nothing was ever missing, except your willingness to see. You stop chasing, you start choosing, and your energy begins to walk ahead of you like a royal signal, clearing paths, drawing allies, opening doors that logic cannot explain. Because this is what wealth really is, not paper, not digits in a system, but powerful presence, a frequency so coherent that life cannot help but bow to it. And now that you've touched it, even briefly, you will never again settle for less. There is a point in this journey, and you may be close, when the mirror no longer feels like a reflection, but a tool. You stop waiting for signs and start becoming one. The outside world, once your master, becomes your canvas. You speak and life responds. You decide and doors open. Not because you're special, but because you're aligned. You've returned to the state of the original human, not a consumer, not a servant, but a creator. That's the secret they buried deepest. The knowledge that creation is not reserved for the chosen few or the spiritually elite. It is your birthright. You weren't meant to compete for scraps. You were designed to generate frequency, and that frequency creates form, wealth, connection, clarity. Not in the future, not after a course, a mentor, or a 10-step plan, but now, here, in the silence between breaths. But creation requires presence. Not force, not fantasy, but presence. That rare, sacred state where the past no longer controls you and the future doesn't own your focus. In presence, your energy condenses. It becomes sharp, pure, potent. And it's in that state that decisions carry weight. Your intentions stop leaking. Your actions stop scattering. You become like a tuning fork, vibrating so clearly that anything not resonant simply falls away. That is when wealth comes, not as a miracle, but as a match, a vibrational consequence. And once you experience this, even once, the game changes. You no longer chase clients, audiences, or validation. They chase you, because they feel something you don't even need to explain: coherence. And yes, the system still exists, the noise, the fear, the illusion, but it no longer holds your attention. You see it for what it is, a stage, a show, and you finally are no longer the actor, but the author. You begin rewriting not just your finances, but your very identity, from beggar to builder, from seeker to source. And people will notice. They'll ask what changed. They'll want your strategy. But there's no strategy, there's just remembrance, a return to the truth that you were never broken, never lacking, only distracted. And in remembering, you reclaim the one thing they could. And never own your frequency. And that frequency is wealth, not the result of what you do, but the evidence of who you've become. It comes suddenly, like thunder on a clear day. One morning, maybe weeks into the ritual, you sit in silence, and something cracks. Not outside, inside. A soundless shatter, a rupture in the false center you thought was you, and in that instant, you see it. Not just the system, not just the conditioning, but the prison, the one you've been decorating your whole life. You see how the goals you chased were assigned to you, how the guilt you carried was never yours, how even your dreams were programmed by someone else's fear. And it doesn't come with drama, it comes with stillness, like waking up from a nightmare you didn't know you were dreaming, and the weight of it nearly breaks you, not because it's cruel, but because it's true. You want to scream, not out of pain, but recognition. How could no one have told you this? How could the people who raised you, taught you, led you, have been trapped too? And then it hits. They didn't know. They were repeating the script just like you, passing it down, like a virus disguised as love. And you can't hate them for it, but you also can't unsee it, because now you feel the frequency of truth vibrating through your entire nervous system, not as an idea, as a remembered state. You remember how it feels to be whole, to be grounded, to belong to yourself again, and in that clarity, every lie begins to fall apart. Every justification, every maybe later, every mask, you cry, you laugh, you rage, you breathe, and then you rise. Not as a different person, but as the version of you that's always been watching from behind your eyes, the you that was never fooled, the you that always knew. And now you don't just understand wealth, you embody it. Not the money, not the symbols, but the state. The rooted, unshakable presence that bends reality to match your knowing. You don't hope things will work. You know they will. You don't wish for clients or peace or partnership. You transmit the frequency that draws them in. You don't perform. You resonate. And that resonance is the sound of chains falling away. Because now, you're dangerous. Not to people, to the system. Because a human who remembers cannot be controlled. A soul in alignment cannot be manipulated. A being vibrating in truth becomes a mirror, and mirrors make liars tremble. And the world will feel you differently now. It will try to label this confidence as arrogance, this clarity as madness, but don't flinch, don't shrink, don't apologize. You didn't come here to conform, you came to wake the others. Is this story resonating with you? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue. And now we arrive at the final hour, not the end, but a beginning so quiet, it almost feels like nothing has changed. But everything has. You walk through the world the same way you did before, same streets, same people, same responsibilities. But something's different. The noise doesn't cling to you anymore. The urgency feels ridiculous now. You're not rushing, and yet everything moves faster for you. You're not begging, but blessings keep arriving. You're not trying to be seen, and yet you are. Something about your energy whispers to the world, I remember who I am. And the world whispers back, we remember too. You've become the embodiment of something rare, a human who has reconnected with the current of truth beneath the ocean of noise, and without saying a word, you've begun to change everything around you. People feel it. They don't always know what it is. They'll just say, you feel different, or you seem lighter, or there's something about you lately. Don't correct them, just smile, because they're not just sensing your new behavior, they're sensing your new frequency. And your frequency is more valuable than any advice, any strategy, any effort. It heals rooms. It inspires silently. It gives others permission to remember themselves. You don't need to teach. Just exist. Just walk into the coffee shop with your heart aligned, your breath steady, your gaze softened by the wisdom of stillness, and watch the ripple it creates. Because now you know wealth is not what you show. It's what you broadcast in your decisions, your silence, your yeses and your nos. You've become a tuning fork, and the people who were meant to find you will. But this isn't about you anymore. That's the final initiation. You realize that this journey and this awakening was never just about escaping scarcity. It was about becoming a lighthouse, a signal in the dark for those still trapped in the script, the ones who are one ritual away from remembering, one moment of stillness away from cracking the illusion. And when they meet you, in person or in spirit, or through the echoes of your story, something will stir in them too. And that's how the old system dies, not in revolution, but in resonance, quietly, in the morning, before the world wakes up. Have you ever done something kind that changed a life forever? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to remember who they are.